Welcome back to the second hour of our study. This is CMS 40, Conscience, Morality, and the Spiritual Life. Lesson 40, we're continuing our study of the Enneagram as a system of understanding human nature. And we're looking at the instinctive subtypes. We started that last hour in Lesson 39. We'll continue that this hour and then look at a more detailed breakdown because I want to make sure that you have plenty of information to see how you look to those who recognize these things, and how you can look to yourself when you begin to recognize these things. Let's begin with a moment of silent prayer, the opportunity once again to utilize 1 John 1:9 if necessary, to confess any known sins so that you might be filled with the Spirit and ready for the study of the Word and study of the understanding of how our human nature functions. So please pray with me. Father, as we study this hour, we ask for your insights into the things that we look at so that we might more clearly understand the difference between you and our human life, between the spiritual life that you have provided us and the life we were born with in our human natures. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. We're on the instinctive subtypes. In Enneagram theory, we are governed by all three instinctual drives because they represent our most fundamental way of being. But one is generally more dominant and influential in our lives and defines the way in which we act out the passion of our Enneagram. So from this author's viewpoint, these are more important than the 9 types, that this is going to be the ultimate of expression in the way you as a type 1, 4, 7, 9, whatever you happen to be, are going to function, are going to act. And we'll look at, probably next week or the week after, we'll look at the thinking process, the appraisal filter process in terms of each of these Enneagram types so that you can see what the attitude is that you would have, what your belief system is, what your self-concept would be in each of these so that we can kind of meld them more into the way we think so that they're not so abstract and it's not just a ton of information, but you can pin it on something that we already know, how we think, how we appraise every situation, every event in our lives. If all three instinctual drives were in balance, we could function perfectly or appropriately to the needs of each situation. These three instinctual drives, of course, the self-preservation, social, and sexual. Nevertheless, such balance is rare, and usually one of these drives is damaged and commands an undue amount of our attention. And it is a person's most damaged instinctual drive that is overused and becomes dominant. So what's he saying here in terms of what we say, how we look at it? One of these three, materialism, self-preservation, social, approbation, sexual, I knew you'd all get that one right, it becomes a dominant feature that drives how we think. Does that agree with what we believe about human nature? Would we call it damaged? Genetically damaged, yeah. I mean, it's through genetics that we acquired these. So it does command an undue amount of our attention. Some people are just totally sexually driven, totally approbation driven, totally socially or materialistically driven with their belongings. And the thing that you have to remember about materialism or the self-preservation approach is that self-preservation or materialism doesn't have to be about how much I can get, but controlling and having enough to be safe and to be self-preserved, to have a home, to have food, to have clothing, those kind of things. So it's not necessarily, materialism is not necessarily the wanton desire to possess more than one should. It can just be about, and in fact in the self-preservation issue, they would say is just about having enough and having control over our environment. Nevertheless, such a balance is rare, and usually one of these drives is damaged and commands an undue amount of our attention, and it is a person's most damaged instinctual drive that is overused and becomes dominant. The resulting imbalance distorts our perception of our essential needs, and we may find ourselves living large portions of our lives in service to this damaged drive. Of course, from the Enneagram viewpoint, which is an essentially atheistic viewpoint, God's all through it, and there are books on the spiritual aspect of the Enneagram, and all of the books, they talk about spirituality, but they're not talking about Christian spirituality. They're talking about some other form of spirituality and spiritual ideals. So they don't understand that this is the way humans are. To them, it's a broken part of being human, not a normal part of being human. And we're all that way. We all have our dominance. We strongly identify with one primary drive and with some secondary traits in another drive. On the occasion when two of the instinctual drives are equally dominant, it is noteworthy that the third drive is usually omitted. People who are sexual and social, self-preservation is usually pretty much a non-issue. If it's self-preservation and sexual, social is pretty much a non-issue. You can see that in the phases of people's lives growing up. As they develop, you'll see periods of time that they are one or two, but rarely are people ever three in their growth process, all three. This perhaps demonstrates the imbalanced use of the three very essential instinctual drives. The instinctual drives appear to be not only instrumental in distinguishing the different styles of manifesting our Enneagram type behavior, but also perhaps the stronger, more unconscious, yet all-pervasive element of our personality type. So essentially what they're saying is that they have found Oops, I did that wrong, didn't I? Okay. That they have found the 9. And these are personality types, the way people face the world. But we found 3 that actually underlie these 9. How many are there that underlie these 9? 6. 6. Chemical, religious, approbation, materialism, power, and sex. Okay? There are 6. They found 3. Where are the rest of them? Integrated in the 9 that they saw. So it's like you saw 9 different people that had these 9 different points. Your realm of personal interaction was 9 people, and each one of these had a different one. And so you got to see these. And then you realized, there's these 3 drives. Well, why didn't you find 6? Well, because you had already incorporated them in the way you saw people functioning in these 9 ways. So you missed the fact that there's not just 3 super important, basic instinctual drives that go with these. Like we found that approbation was in here as one of them. But we already know that approbation is in 3 of the 9 personality types, just different variations of approbation. Okay? And if you look at it, you can find approbation in the 1, the 9, the 8, 7, 6, and 5. In some form, there's approbation in some form. But basically, it's those. So that's the problem with this system. Just like the 5 moral foundations have a problem. And we'll look at those. We'll actually break down in the 5, we're not going to get anywhere near all of these slides today, are we? And the 5 moral foundations of Haidt, Jonathan Haidt has found, we're going to look at the 5 moral foundation dictionary and look at the words that they have subcategorized under these 5. And we will see that they break down into, surprise, 6 categories that we call cramps: chemical, religious, approbation, materialism, power, and sexual. They break down into those very well. It's just people seeing from different perspectives. Different perspectives. And of course, we see it from the sinful nature, the human sinful nature perspective. That is the most correct. Well, if God shows me or someone else 7, that's okay. But I can't find 7. I've looked and looked and looked for 7. I can't find 7. Certainly can't find 9. And that's obvious that of the 9, that they're all mixtures of more than one of the 6. Okay? So we'll look at that. But this is just a way of looking at it. But we chose the Enneagram as the one that we would study the most because it is the most pervasive of any that I've found. The MBTI is the Myers-Briggs type indicators is also very, very commonly used out there, but it's not quite as easy to figure out. MBTI. Okay, got 4. I'm sorry, you got how many are there? 5. There are 5, I think, in the MBTI, and the Enneagram is the one that has the most description. So that's why we've chosen it to be the subject of our look into how people function. The key there, it's the stronger, it's all pervasive element of our personality type. Okay. We know there are 6. They found 3. In fact, the instinctual drives of 2 people are more apt to determine successful relationships than their Enneagram points. If you get on the internet and look, you will find a lot of websites dedicated to type compatibilities, type matching for relationships. I'm a 3. What kind of woman can I look for? Okay. I'm a 4. What kind of a man can I look for? Okay. Because people are interested in what? That one-to-one sexual instinct is very powerful, so they're looking for those relationships. And according to this author here, the instinctual drives are more apt to determine successful relationships than the points themselves, whether a 1 and a 4 go together, or a 2 and a 9 go together, or whatever. It's more these 3 that are most important in determining your compatibility with someone else. Okay? The reason is that the instinctual drive is more indicative of our animal nature. Animal nature. We call it human nature. The one enabling us to survive, whereas our personality also includes our essence qualities that we define as human nature. Well, we define them all as human nature. These 2 together create a partnership that some Enneagram psychologists call the personality or false self. You didn't know you had a false self, did you? It's because you just haven't found your real self yet that is just wonderful. And we're all waiting for you to find it because we can't find it either. Okay. It appears that the degree to which our instinctual drives impulse control our lives is subject to the same kind of energy as our Enneagram point. The degree to which our instinctual drive impulses control our lives is subject to the same kind of energy, whatever that is. For example, we can experience our drives and passions mildly or intensely. We can feel some sense of control or very little control at all. And in addition, we can either embrace our particular instinctual drive or act totally against it. Okay? Kind of like the phobic, counterphobic, kind of like the way I used the illustration for the 2, 3s, and 4s. You can try to give to get, you can try to impress to get, or you can try to be unique and distant and aloof and get that approbation. More specifically, our dominant instinctual drive is, in actuality, our area of greatest weakness. Okay? I love how they see this, that our instinctual drives are a weakness. Thus, when our sense of survival is threatened, something has triggered whatever button happens to relate not only to our Enneagram point, but more important also to our instinctual drive. The fixation then becomes even more severe as we take on the additional fears of the instinctual drive. A fear is threat to me. Okay? The important factor here is that the triggering element of the fixation is the instinctual drive's issue. Nevertheless, the flavor will always be that of the Enneagram type. In other words, the types are going to influence how your instinctual drives are expressed. Nevertheless, the flavor will always be that of the Enneagram type, as the fixation and the drive are interactive, linked, and always related to the Ennea type. In the context of the false self or personality, did you know your personality is your false self? It is the instinctual drive that supposedly protects the survival of the Enneagram point and is called to the front lines when in stress. However, since the dominant instinctual drive is actually one's weak link, its entrance in times of stress may ultimately produce no protection at all to one's survival and in fact may exacerbate the level of stress and ultimate fixation. Meaning what? That in the Enneagram arena, sexual approbation or materialism, when they come up, may actually give you more trouble rather than help you. Guess we know that's true, right? That's just obvious. That when we try to walk in human good, where do we end up? In human bad. When we try to walk in human good, what's the result? Frustration. Frustration. I mean, how many times, don't raise your hand, don't tell me, but how many times have you been really a good human being, really helping, well, okay, other than zero, how do I, okay, other than, and you've been really good and nice to someone, very helpful, and they've kicked sand in your face. Huh? They've rejected you, they've treated you poorly, they've betrayed you, they have insulted you, all of that. And you've tried really hard to be good, and then what does it lead to? Frustration. And then what do? Where do you immediately go? Human bad swearing. Right? You go to human bad. Right? You go to human bad. Because there is no satisfaction in human good. It always frustrates. It always frustrates. Why does it do that? Why does it always frustrate? It's not God. Only God's way works. Everything else is just an attempt to try to manage, to try to be happy. That's why I call them the happiness attainment motivators. We're trying to be happy. They motivate us that we're going to get some, but it always fails. Look at the people who have everything, materialism. Look at the people who have everything. What's their suicide rate? What's their divorce rate? What's their psychiatric drug rate? You know, I mean, you look at the people, you see them all the time. They're miserable people, yet they have attained their happiness motivator has been fulfilled. But they're frustrated and miserable. Right? They don't work. And what do they have to turn to for true happiness? God. When do they cry out? Well, they cry out, I have done this. I am the most successful, this, that, whatever, and I'm miserable. God, show me what's wrong. Okay? They cry out to God. Well, that's because God, you know that old thing, there's a God-shaped hole in everybody's heart. There's a God-shaped hole in every one of the happiness attainment motivators. when you achieve what you think is going to bring you happiness and realize that it does not, where do you turn? Where do you turn? Well, some people turn to drugs. Then they find out that doesn't work. So then where do you turn? Well, try something else. Try all 6. Be Solomon. Try all 6. And then when you failed, what do you have to say? Vanity, vanity, everything is vanity. And you turn to God. You turn to God. Okay? That's the whole purpose. So all of these instincts, these weak links that we think are our strong points, that, if I do this, I'll be okay. Nope. If I do this, I'm going to end up just as miserable as when I did that. The real question is, how do we express anger, fear, and desire? How do we experience illness, and what types of illnesses do we have? How do we act when we're happy or sad? As an example, ask yourself how you like to spend your time. Do you tend to make sure your own needs are met and satisfied with the essentials of life? Self-preservation. Or does your attention go to being in the company of others? And if so, how many others, and or do you need to be in the service of others to be happy? Or instead, do you find that your ultimate expression of self is linked to the company of one significant other in an intimate and profound way, and that no matter where you are or what you are doing, you are always in search of that beloved, special person? I cannot pass this by without comment. Imagine that. That's right. Why is it that in that two people, the marriage is likened to the church relationship, our relationship to God? Because it's the closest thing there is that God has allowed in human nature. It's the closest thing there is to that kind of a relationship. So that's why ultimately you can find more people who are happy in their marital relationship than with any of the other hams or instinctual drives, because it's the closest thing. It's the closest thing. And so what does God do for those who aren't married? He said, I will be their husband. I will be their husband, so that they can have that relationship. Okay? All right. So the real question is, how do we express anger, fear, and desire? How do we experience illness, and what types of illnesses do we have? How do we act when we're happy or sad? As an example, ask yourself how you like to spend your time. How do you like to spend your time? What are your interests, and which instinctual variant does it relate to? Does it relate to self-preservation? Is it about things in my immediate vicinity, my environment, my nest? If you go back to those animal terms from watching Animal Planet, is it about my nest and my immediate family needs? Or is it more about social? Or is it more about a person, a significant other person? Okay? All of those are going to be frustrating for you. You must understand that. They are always going to frustrate you. Even though you will gain some amount of happiness from them, they're always going to be frustrating to you until you deal with them from a spiritual perspective. Then you're like Paul. It doesn't matter what circumstances I find myself in. A self-preservation issue, a social issue, a sexual issue, I am content. Okay? Why? Well, what is the kingdom all about? Righteousness, peace, and joy. Okay? What is the source of joy? What's the source of peace? What's the source of patience? It's all from God. And so any circumstance then becomes fulfilling because of the spiritual perspective. So all of this negative that I talk about and all of this is from the human perspective, not if you are walking by means of the Spirit, then each of them can be a fully rewarding, fully enjoyable way of life, aspect of life. Okay. Then the conclusion from Catherine Chernicky-Fauve. I found that the instinctual drives appear to be not only instrumental in distinguishing the different styles of manifesting our Enneagram type behavior, but also perhaps the stronger, more unconscious, yet all-pervasive element of our personality type. So now you learned all about the 9 personality types, and you realize that it's these 3 that are the most important. You've wasted all that time. All right, here's another perspective. Our instinctual drives motivate us in the ongoing human struggle to create and sustain relationships, to aggressively seek what we need to survive, and to defend what we have and fear losing. A noteworthy point of interest with respect to the Enneagram instinct subtypes is that the dominant instinctual drive, self-preserving, social, or sexual, will shift to the other 2 subtypes as needed to ensure its influential role in the trialectic instinctual system. The way in which the dominant subtype employs the other 2 appears to be very specific and predictable. The dominant drive maintains the role of the commander-in-chief, and the other 2 are channeled through its lens, or through its filtering. Generally, this is very primal and often unconscious, because you're just an animal, you know. This is especially apparent with respect to the human drive to seek a mate and pair bonding, but applies to all areas of life. If a relationship displays conflicting instinctual needs, the dominant drive perceives it as a threat to security and acts accordingly. Self-interest, selfism. Okay? We all are ultimately driven by selfism. How does it relate to me? Confusion about the manner in which the instinctual drives manifest to create and maintain a sense of security is often the root of misunderstandings. Excuse me. Such disturbances in the instinctual drive are often the catalyst for seeking counsel or therapy. Go to the bookstore. Go to the self-help section. Here's the interpersonal relationship section. Social. Here's the sex section. Sexual one-to-one. Here's the how to be a success and have everything wonderful materialism section. That's what they go by. Okay? And then you can go over, you can turn around and over here's the chemical, the addiction and problems, eating and all those kind of issue, self-help books. And then over on this side, you have the power, how to get what you want, how to be in charge, what you should do to be in charge, to be in control, all of that. Have I left any out? That's only 5. I left out religion. Is religion in the self-help section? It's all about religion, isn't it? Well, you've got every kind of book. Enneagrams and MBTIs and 5 foundations and every kind of religious system that there is. Okay? I mean, that's basically what it's all about. When it's a person is involved in selfism, that's the section of the bookstore they go to. I've been going there for years. I mean, that's been I've looked at all that kind of stuff, studied all of it, and to try to find what to teach. Now, originally I went to try to find the answers to life. Okay? And then now I go there to try to find bad examples. Why you will fail the way I failed by looking to those things for happiness. Okay? All right, here are the instinctive subtypes, and you're a self-preserving person. Okay? Self-preserving person. That's your dominant instinctual subtype. Materialism, my nest, my stuff, the things that I need, food, clothing, shelter, okay. And then out from there. Okay. That's the type I'm mostly, or I am at this particular time. But then I move to sexual, okay, to the sexual instinct. So the self-preserving subtype considers a mate as an essential need to maintain and ensure security. See, security. It's about self. It's what I need. Therefore, when in search of a mate, the self-preserving subtype will feel anxiety and suspense until a mate is secured. In order to attract a mate, the self-preserving subtype will shift to their respective sexual instinctual drive to accommodate this fear. I got to have somebody. My nest isn't enough. I got to bring somebody into that nest, is what the person says. Outwardly, the self-preserving subtype will behave like the sexual subtype, pay more attention to their desirability, and will be sensual or flirtatious. At first, the self-preserving subtype will spend more time will spend more time on one-on-one, more with the possible mate. Once the mate is secured, the self-preserving subtype will return to basic routines that ideally would include the mate. So now the self-preserving includes another person now. An area of pain and disappointment for this subtype is when they have a mate that is unwilling to pay attention to issues of security and disrupt their need for inner calm. So you have a mate that doesn't share your same instinctual drive for the nest. So I'm always reminded when I teach this of the lady that came to the office and she wanted treatment. She was getting married and she wanted to feel good before her honeymoon, while she was on her honeymoon. And so I gave her the treatment and she was feeling great. She went off, got married, and went on her honeymoon, and I saw her 9 months later. She came back. And I said, wow, it's been 9 months since you were here. I said, you could have had a baby by now. She said, didn't have a baby, but I got a divorce. I said, you did what? She said, I got a divorce. And I said, why is that? And she said, well, we went on our honeymoon. We had a wonderful time. We came back. We walked in the house. He dropped the bags down and said, I'm going to the bar with the guys and watch the football game. She said, what? We lived together for 2 years. You never went to the bar to be with the guys to watch the football game. He said, yes, but you're mine now. I can do what I want. And walked out the door. And so she said, as he was leaving, I'll see you in divorce court. And so they got divorced. Okay? So they had this, they went, during this whole 2 years that they lived together, he went to sexual subtype, right? To court her and win her. And then when, and I'm putting this in the wrong section, but then when that was over and he had her, he had accomplished his goal, he had a mate, what did he revert to? Social. Social. Honesty. Right? To social. He's going out with the guys again. He hadn't done it for 2 years, but now he had his mate, so he went back to social, not self-preservation. She went back to self-preservation. She had her mate. She went back to self-preservation. So they both played the secondary subtype game to get their mates, but they were not compatible. He was social. She was self-preservation. They didn't get along. It wasn't going to work. And they didn't even give it time, of course. You'd think that one incident that they could talk it over. And they may have had more confrontations than just the one she told me about. But that's the one I always think about with these subtypes, is that they went to, and you see it all the time, that people fall madly in love, and then when the year is up, they end up divorced because they go into their particular subtypes, their particular hams, their particular happiness attainment motivators, and that they're not compatible. The other one isn't compatible with the other person. Okay. So now social moves to self-preserving. The social subtype will think in terms more indicative of the self-preserving subtype than selecting a mate. Okay? They're not so sexual, they're self-preserving. This is very important to ensure the desired security that rank and social status can provide. The social subtype seeks a mate with a shared social vision and similar values. So it's not so much about the sexual subtype. This is necessary to fulfill the desire for a mate that will join them in their activities. Therefore, a secure social position is essential. So then you get people that get married and you say, they really have a lot in common, but they really don't seem to love each other that much. Okay? But they're a good fit. Okay? Much attention is paid to the potential mate's connections, rank, and ability to provide financial security. Materialism. The subtype enjoys bringing others together, feeling that the more the merrier, rather than just being alone, the two of them. They are often adept at creating the center stage and often use their home for social events, gatherings, and causes. At first, the social subtype will spend more time one-on-one with the potential mate. But then they're going to go to their preferred subtype. Once the mate is in place, the social subtype will return to outside interests, groups, and or activities. Ideally, this is with their mate, but not like the illustration that I used where it's, I'm not taking you, I'm going with the guys. The area of pain and disappointment for this subtype is when they have a mate that is unwilling to pay attention to their need for people, activities, causes, and unwilling to share their interest in others. Now the sexual subtype moves to social. So you have a sexual subtype dominance, now going to social. The sexual subtype, one-on-one, will seek the greater world or social arena to find a desired mate. Okay? I got to go out so I can find the right person. Okay? Are they really interested in the social? No, that's just where the field is. The sexual subtype is normally happily tucked away in a secluded setting with one significant other. However, when alone or in search of a mate, this subtype will behave much more like the social subtype. Okay? Until they find the person, and then they'll either move to sexual or they'll move back into self-preservation, whichever is their dominant. And as the Enneatype people would say, they're more damaged. One must be with others to find the other. Once the mate is selected, the social activity will be replaced by the dominant drive for time spent in union with the other one-on-one. At first, the sexual subtype may spend time with the potential mate in the company of others. They become a pair even in groups. Then, when the passion for deeper connection is ignited, the sexual subtype will want to bond totally with their desired other. When the mate is determined, the sexual subtype will return to one-on-one style of relating. Ideally, this is intense time spent with the desired other or mate. The area of pain and disappointment for this subtype is when they have a mate that is unwilling to pay attention to their degree of connection and intimately share their deepest and innermost thoughts. So, what can happen? You go out social to find a mate. You find a mate that is social. That's why they're there. They fall in love with you. Hormones, chemicals, all those kind of things happen. They fall in love, you get married, and they want to go out and be social again, where the sexual one-on-one subtype only went social to find the person. It's not where they wanted to be. Okay? So then you end up with relationship difficulties that way. There's a lot of relationship difficulty possibilities out there. All right, let's see here. Let's do this, and then we'll close for today before we get too far into our next section. The approbation-centered strategies. The 2 is the pleaser. seeks love by being pleasing, self-sacrificing. The negative side becomes prideful, resentful, and angry. The 3 is the overachiever. They seek approval by being productive, overachieving, and they avoid emotions. Emotions just get in the way of success. The 4, the third of the primary approbation types, is the dramatic individualist. Seeks acceptance with their unique expression and dramatic stories. But they hold on to tragedy. How bad things are for me, how I've been mistreated, how misunderstood, all of those things. Got any others you want to bring up? But they hold on to tragedy. What's that? Hangnails are a disaster. Okay. Well, let's see if we can cover a little bit of the 2, 3, 4 strategies. Okay, these are the approbation strategies, predominantly approbation. These 3 strategies tend to rate themselves according to how others see them. Their identity is in the hands of others. They repress their assertive, vindictive power grabbing, and when they do assert themselves or grab for power, they do it indirectly, obliquely, and without noticing that they are doing it. They are nice, but they fall prey to Thompson's law. What you don't get up front, you tend to get out back. They don't acknowledge their aggression needs openly, so they use manipulation, guilt, self-pity, more passive and proper ways of asserting themselves. These people have trouble saying no, standing their ground, and doing what they really want. They do what society wants, or mother wanted, or what will bring recognition. They don't do what they want. Instead, they play roles. They live through others, or they lament their helpless lot in life. Their deepest emotions are undeveloped, and so they live through social or artistic forms. They act. Their dependency on the esteem and response of others does give them a secondary gain. They are extremely sensitive to the needs and wants of others. Their emotional life depends on them, and we all get good at what we need for survival. In healthy human good people, this becomes utter altruism and nurturing friendship. In emotional revolt or neurotic people, it can become devouring intensiveness or complete codependency, not to mention flattery or seduction. They act. Circle that word. 2s, 3s, and 4s are acting in a way that they can get approbation. They're acting. Right? They'll do what they need to do. Then they're upset about it if it doesn't work. Then they're upset about it if it doesn't work. The so-called heart-type people. It's another of the Enneagram studies that you'll come across, is that they're called the heart-type people. The emotionally centered, approbation-motivated approach to life are relationship-oriented, and their domain is subjective feelings. How do I feel? So when they talk, they're going to say, I can relate to that. I feel what you mean. They're all about subjective feelings and relating. Concerned with what others think of them, image, and prestige, they see themselves as being for others, often believing they know what's best for them, the other person. They dislike being alone, may feel sad, inadequate, and ashamed. Are we ever like that? Those of us that aren't 4s. Those of us who are 4s are always like that. Are the rest of us like that sometimes too? Relationship-oriented, subjective feelings as our domain, emotionally centered, concerned about what others think of you. Sure, we're all like that to some degree, in some situations more than others. All right, let's quickly review the helpers, the type 2. Compulsively motivated by the need to feel needed through caring for others. Right? Caring for others. Human good, they're not looking for reward until they get into the negative side of their approbation, human bad, and then what do they become? Vindictive. You didn't care enough for me. All that I have done for you, and you did nothing for me. You weren't there when I needed you. Right? We had a neighbor like that one time that was exactly like that. Exactly like that. I was sick and you weren't there. I didn't know you were sick. Did that matter? No. You should have known that I was sick. Right? You should have known that I was sick. To be loved, they compulsively motivated by the need to feel needed through caring for others, experience the psychological addiction of pride. I deserve to be loved for all that I do. To be loved, to be needed, to be appreciated, to get others to respond to them, to vindicate their claims about themselves. I'm a good person. See, a little bit of religious overtones to the two. A little bit of religious along with their approbation. When the social instinct is dominant, which means that you have an approbation instinct plus an approbation style, the fear of being unloved is less focused on key individuals. The sin of pride becomes very apparent in this subtype and focuses on the need for approbation in all situations. So the social instinct, approbation plus approbation, they need everybody to love them. So when they receive Emmy, what is that award? You like me. You really like me. Who was that did that? Sally Fields. Right? Social approbation. You'll find a lot of approbation, two-type approbation people in acting, in acting, because then they can get that love. But they don't think that they deserve it because they really know inside that they're rotten people. Right? But then when you show them by giving them that, then they feel vindicated and they feel like they have been loved. The image feeling issues of the type combine with the social instinct and can make for the very caring, compassionate drive that is often seen in the social two. The self-preservation, that's materialism plus approbation too, turns their fear of being unloved into material giving. They give themselves in concrete terms as in doing things for others. They give you stuff. Giving and doing can result in a feeling of entitlement, where they give to get, expecting the return of whatever good they have brought to others. The sexual subtype 2 loves attention. They give by shows of affection and by spending time with those they are focused on. Can't get enough of you kind of friend. Have to be with you all the time. Don't want you with anybody else kind of friend. You got to spend time with me. That's the sexual subtype, the one-on-one intimate relationship focused on one other person. Okay? They make themselves attractive to be lovable, so they act in a way that they think you will find them attractive. They can be very flirtatious, very good at making the other person feel special. On the downside, if this attention is not reciprocated, they can become controlling and manipulative, even vindictive and murderous. Okay. Well, that's good for today. We covered 41 of the 71 slides, or 40 of the 71 slides. So once again, we're behind schedule, but who cares? It's not a problem. I don't have to be right. I don't have to succeed. I can just do, right? Okay. All right. Let's close with a word of prayer. Well, then we'll get into our time of petition. And then we'll close for the day. Father, we're grateful that you have provided for us insight through your word as we recall the things of your word from Solomon, from the Psalms and the Proverbs and the illustrations in the Gospels and the direct doctrines that we've seen in the New Testament letters, the examples that we see in the Old Testament characters, that we can see how these things play out, how people are happy in their humanness for a while, until that happiness erodes with the negative side of their attainment motivators. How they can go from human good to human bad, from morality to immorality. And we ask that you show us these things in our lives so that we can focus on what you have provided for us in our new natures. We thank you that our old natures died with Jesus on the cross. We ask that you show us how we can count them dead so that we can live only in the newness of life, forgetting that which is behind, not submitting our members to the evil nature, but submitting our members to righteousness. We thank you in Jesus' name.